Okay, what is started, you can begin.
Okay. Good afternoon, Mr. Bishu. Good afternoon, classmates. My name is Donny Rampasad, and today, together with Mr. Ronald Singh, we will be presenting the Leadership Experience, Chapter 12, entitled Power and Influence by the author Richard L. Daft. We'll start with an overview of this chapter. This chapter explores the topic of leadership, power, and influence in detail. The chapter opens with a consideration of charismatic and transformational leadership, two leadership styles that rely strongly on a leader's personal characteristic as a source of power. It next examines what we mean by the term power and influence, look at some sources and types of power, and outline ways leaders exercise power and influence through political activity. Finally, we briefly consider some ethical aspects of using power and influence. Our objectives today are to have brief discussions on the following topics: transactional leadership, transformational leadership, charismatic leadership, influence, power, types of leader power, sources of leader power in organization, increasing power through political activity, tactics for asserting leader influence, and ethical consideration in using power and politics. We start off with transactional leadership. What is transactional leadership? Transactional leadership is a transaction or exchange process between leaders and followers. The basis of transactional leadership is a transaction or exchange process between leaders and followers. The transactional leader recognizes followers' needs and desires and then clarifies how those needs and desires will be satisfied in exchange for meeting specific objectives or performing certain duties. Transactional leaders focus on the present and excel at keeping the organization running smoothly and efficiently. Transactional leadership can be quite effective by clarifying expectations. Leaders help build followers' confidence. This type of leadership pattern might be the first type of leadership pattern that we would have encountered in our lives. Most of us, our parents, as little children growing up, would have promised us certain things. I remember distinctly my father telling me do well in exams and I would get a BMX bicycle. Again, we see there's a transaction, something for something. This leadership pattern is also evident. This type of leadership pattern is also evident on a daily basis on the job site. On numerous occasions, you would find subordinates going to the supervisors, be it the corporal, the sergeant, or the inspectors, and requesting time off. I distinctly remember at my time at the Shawana's police, where then Inspector Bertie was in charge. And I would go to Mr. Bertie and ask for time off. Tell Mr. Bertie I have a family function to attend to. And he would grant me the time off with a stipulation attached. I would have to come in on one of my days off to perform a specific duty. Again, this is a clear example of transactional leadership, something for something. Everyone gets what they want. The subordinate the follower gets what he wants, the leader gets what he wants, and the organization keeps running smoothly and efficiently. Very much. All right, we now move on to transformational leadership. What is transformational leadership? Transformational leadership is leadership characterized by the ability to bring about significant change in followers and the organization. Transformational leaders have the ability to lead changes in an organization, vision, strategy, and culture, as well as promote innovation in products and technologies. Transformational leadership is based on the personal values, beliefs, and qualities of the leader, rather than an exchange process between leader and followers. Transformational leadership skills can be learned and are not ingrained personality characteristics. Transformational leaders are typically emotionally stable and positively engaged with the world around them. And they have a strong ability to recognize and understand others' emotion. At this juncture, I'd like to pause and ask from the classroom, from members of the class, if they could give examples of any any transformational leader, be it local or international? Classmates? Don't you all rush at the same time? Okay, if no one wants to answer, I would give the examples. We have the international examples, such as Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates, Henry Ford. But closer to home, right in the TTPS, it's often said that the recently confirmed DCP, McDonald Jacob, is a transformational leader. Right? He was instrumental in setting up the crime and problem analysis branch within the TTPS, and he has been an advocate for incorporating technology, modern and contemporary police within the TTPS. Moving on, we look at transformational versus transactional leadership. Yeah. Transformational leadership develops followers into leaders. Transformational leadership elevates the concern of followers from lower level physical needs, such as safety and security, to higher level needs, such as self-esteem and self-actualization. Transformational leadership inspires followers to go beyond their own self-interest for the good of the group. Transformational leadership paints a vision of a desired future state and communicates it in a way that makes the pain of change worth the effort. All right, so you get just one. Now, is effective leadership. Effective leaders exhibit both transactional and transformational leadership patterns. So it's not that it have to be either or, it can be both at the same time. One leader can be both transactional and transformational at the same time. Whereas transactional leaders promote stability, transformational leaders create significant change in followers as well as in the organization. Leaders can learn to be transformational as well as transactional. We now move on to charismatic leadership. What is charisma? Charisma is a seemingly innate ability to inspire enthusiasm, interest, and affection from followers. Charismatic leaders have the ability to inspire and motivate people to do more than they would normally do, despite obstacles and personal sacrifice. What are some of the characteristics of a charismatic leader? Charismatic leaders have an emotional impact on people because they appeal to both the heart and mind. Yeah. They have an ability to communicate complex ideas and goals in clear, compelling ways so that everyone can understand and identify with their message. Charismatic leaders inspire followers with an abiding faith, even if the faith can be stated in specific goals and are easily attained. The faith itself becomes a reward to followers. Charismatic leaders also act in unconventional ways and use unconventional means to transcend the status quo and create change. Charismatic leaders earn followers' trust by being willing to incur great personal risk. Putting themselves on the line affirms charismatic leaders as passionate advocates for the vision. Charismatic leaders' influence comes from personal characteristics rather than a formal position of authority. People admire, respect, and identify with the leader and want to be like him or her. They are very likable. Again, I want to ask from the class if they could give any example of charismatic leaders.
Coleman Booth.
Yeah. Master Padre.
You know what, bro? Mr. Pete Rowley.
All correct answers. All right. I would like to give some examples. All right. We right in the Caribbean, we would have Fidel Castro. Right. We all are aware Mr. Mahatma Gandhi, Martin Luther King, Nelson Mandela. But I would like to give an example of who I believe was a charismatic leader, a person I had the pleasure of working with, and no, it's not Mr. Booty. Right, is Mr. former Senior Superintendent of Police, Mr. Johnny Abraham. I had the pleasure of working with him some years ago, and in my opinion, he was one of the most charismatic leaders that the TTPS would have ever had. Right, he had an emotional impact. Anyone who would have any interaction with Mr. Abraham would have realized that he had a very unique way of communicating. Right, he inspired persons. He had very unconventional methods, and these unconventional methods would have achieved the organization goals. He was trustworthy. He was always on the field with the workers, and he was very likable, not only by the junior officers, but a lot of senior officers wanted to be like Mr. Abraham. Right, we now move on to what is called the black hat of charisma. Now, charisma is good, but is not always used for the good of the society or the organization. One characteristic of charisma noted by most researchers is that it can be a curse as well as a blessing. Charisma isn't always used to benefit the group, organization, or society. It can also be used for self-serving purposes, which lead to deception, manipulation, and exploitation of others. Because the basis of charisma is emotional rather than logical or rational, it is a risky and potentially dangerous. An example of this is Hitler, the German leader Hitler. Moving on, there are two types of charismatic leaders. These are personalized charismatic leader and socialized charismatic leader. Personalized charismatic leader are characterized as self-aggrandizing, non-egalitarian, and exploitive. Basically, personalized behavior is based on caring about oneself. On the other hand, socialized charismatic leader is about empowering, egalitarian, and supportive. Socialized behavior is based on valuing others. We now move on to power, influence, and leadership. Power and influence are highly important concepts in the study of leadership. Indeed, leadership relies on the use of power to get things done. Right? Power can be defined as the ability of one person or department in an organization to influence other people to bring about desired outcomes. On the other hand, influence is the effect of a person's action have on the attitudes, values, beliefs, or action of others. To differentiate between power and influence, we can look at the COVID-19 situation and the government's response to it. On the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic last year, the government, through moral suasion, were trying to influence persons' behavior in terms of wearing face masks. Right? They were using moral suasion to influence members of the public to wear the face mask. However, when this wasn't working, they would have shown their power by going to Parliament and enacting legislation to ensure that persons, members of the public, were wearing their safe mask. So we have there where they were using their influence through moral suasion to try and influence persons to wear the face mask. On the other hand, now we have where they would have displayed their power by enacting legislation to ensure that persons were wearing face masks. As we usually think of power and influence as belonging to the leader, followers may also influence the leader's behavior in any number of ways, for better or worse. Right? Recently, a few years ago, it's alleged that a former leader of a certain political party in Trinidad and Tobago was being influenced by some of our followers who had formed themselves into a cabal. Again, it is alleged. Right? More recently, for those who follow European soccer, we would have seen where clubs in England, Germany, Spain would have attempted to form the European Super League. Right? Let's take clubs like Liverpool, for example. Right? The leaders of the club, they had decided to join this European Super League. Yeah. However, the followers of this club, they had other ideas. They protested against it, and they were able to change. They were able to influence the leader of these clubs' decision, and they would have pulled out of the European Super League. Right, moving on, we have five types of leader power: legitimate power, reward power, coercive power, expert power, and reverent power. Legitimate power is authority granted from a formal position. For example, the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, the Commissioner of Police, the Commissioner of Prisons. Reward power. This is the authority to bestow rewards on other people. For example, say again, the Commissioner of Police, he has the authority to bestow rewards on members of the TTPS. Just recently, we would have seen where 2 police officers from the Blanchisseuse police station would have rescued 4 doctors who had found themselves in difficulties while swimming off the north coast in the area of the Blanchisseuse beach. These 2 officers were rewarded monetarily by the Commissioner of Police. I think they would have gotten about $300. I'm not certain, but they were rewarded. Coercive power. This is the authority to punish or recommend punishment. Again, within the police service, we have what we call the one-man tribunal. This is where a superintendent or a senior superintendent would be in charge of a tribunal where an officer would have been charged for some offense. Now, this person, this senior superintendent, he have the authority to punish or recommend punishment. Expert power. This is authority resulting from a leader's special knowledge or skill. Again, within the TTPS, where we say, take for example, leaders within the crime scene investigation. Because of that person's particular skill set or knowledge base, they would possess a certain amount of power. And the last type of power is reverent power. This is authority based on personality characteristics that command followers' attention, respect, and admiration, so that they want to emulate the leader. This is basically followers gravitate towards persons who have a likable personality. We now move on to responses to the use of power. Basically, there are 3 responses to the use of power. These are compliance, resistance, and commitment. Compliance is basically following the direction of the person with power, regardless of how much agreement there is with that person's direction. So you might not agree with the direction that person is going, but you comply. I guess that is where the terminology comply and then complain would have come about. That's it. Resistance is basically the act of deliberately disobeying orders or deliberately avoiding carrying out instructions. And commitment is basically adopting the leader's viewpoint and enthusiastically carrying out instructions. These we could refer to them as yes men. We now move on to sources of leader power in organization. There are 4 sources of leader power in organization. They are interdepartmental dependency, control over information, organizational centrality, and coping with uncertainty. These 4 sources lead to increased power. Interdepartmental dependency. One key source of leader power in many organizations is interdepartmental dependency. Materials, resources, and information may flow between departments in one direction. In such cases, leaders in the department receiving resources would have less power than those in the department that provides them. For example, see within the TTPS, we have the human resource department, and then we have the divisional, the respective divisions, sections, and branches. Now, the human resource department is the department that is responsible for allocating the resources to the various departments, to the various divisions. Human resource, the department, they allocate manpower. So you'll find that this department, the human resource department, would have more power than leaders in this department would have more power than leaders in the respective division or sections, because these leaders in the division and sections are dependent on the leader at the human resource department to provide the necessary human resource that is required for the smooth running of the respective division or section. At any stage, if you all have any need any clarification, you can stop me right and ask for clarification. I take it that you all are understanding everything that I'm saying because no one asks any questions. We now move on to control over information. I think control over information involves both access to information and control how and to whom it is distributed. It is an important source of power for leaders. Leaders recognize that information is a primary business resource, and that by controlling what information is collected and how it is interpreted and how it is shared, they can influence how decisions are made. Again, as you go up the food chain, go up the hierarchy of the TTPS, you'll find that those who hold higher office would have more information, right? And based on the information that leaders have, they would be able to make certain decisions. But then again, the information that these senior officers would have gotten is they would have accumulated through the juniors who provide through various intelligence means, would have acquired this information and pass it up the food chain to the respective leaders. But again, the person who has the more information wields more power. Now move on to organizational centrality. Centrality is basically where a leader or a department's role in the primary activity of an organization. Centrality is associated with more power because it reflects the contribution made to the organization. Straight away. And so basically what this is saying is like, for example, within the TTPS, right? The TTPS core function is to prevent crime, right? So you'll find sections that deal primarily with preventing crime would have more power than other sections that do not provide this core function. Say, for example, the agencies like the IATF, the Guard and Emergency Branch, the SWAT leaders at these divisions, these sections, would have more power than leaders, say, at the FMU, the Facilities Management Unit. The Facilities Management Unit, they basically fix the toilets and sinks, and don't get me wrong, we all need working toilets at the station. But the leaders at the ITF, the GB, the SWAT, they deal with the central function of the TTPS, which is preventing crime and other infractions of the law. Alright, we now move on to coping with uncertainty. The environment can change swiftly and create uncertainty and complexity for leaders. In the face of uncertainty, little information is available to leaders to appropriate course of action. Leaders in the department that cope well with this uncertainty will increase their power. So basically, coping with uncertainty is, say for example, the COVID-19 pandemic. Leaders at stations, or sections, or even divisions who would have dealt with this pandemic more effectively would have more power than other leaders who had not dealt with it properly. Right? So let me say, for example, at the Freeport station, the protocols were implemented and adhered to. Right? The inspector at the Freeport police station, he would have been seen to have more power than, say, for example, at the Cuba station, where the protocols weren't fully adhered to, implemented, and there was an outbreak, and one point in time, the whole station, the whole of the Cuba police station had to be quarantined. Right? So the leaders who deal with uncertainty would have increased power as opposed to the leaders who do not deal with uncertainty, who do not cope well with uncertainty. At this point, I now hand it over to Mr. Ronald Singh, who would continue the presentation.
Good afternoon, Mr. Bishu, fellow classmates. Yes. Increased power through political activity. Sometimes you hear this, you think about governmental control, you think about organizations that have a triangular effect. Politics involves activities to acquire, develop, and use power and other resources to obtain desired future outcomes where there is uncertainty or disagreement about choices. Politically skillful leaders strive to understand others' viewpoints and needs, desires, and goals for the term of organization. Political leaders use their understanding to influence people to act in ways to help the leader accomplish his or her goals. Leaders at most organizations engage in some degree of political activity aimed at influencing government policies. For instance, there are organizations within Trinidad and Tobago that they align themselves close to the political leaders to get benefits, get contracts to benefit themselves and others. Political leaders use their understanding to influence people to act in ways to help the leader accomplish his or her goals. Leaders at most organizations engage in some degree of political activity aimed at influencing government policies. Government choices represent a critical source of uncertainty for businesses as well as non-profit organizations. Organizations use political activity to try to influence decisions that will be to their benefit. Political behavior can either be a positive or negative force, which can be the mechanism for accomplishing things through formal policies or positional power. Politics involves activities to acquire, develop, and use power and other resources to obtain desired future outcomes where there's uncertainty or disagreement about choices. Politically skillful leaders strive to understand others, viewpoints, needs, desires, and goals, and use their understanding to influence people to act in ways to help the leader accomplish his or her goals for the team organization. Russell Chu, who runs the nation's air traffic control system for the Federal Aviation Administration, has been criticized for his lack of political savvy. Although Chu has some notable successes since he took the job as the first leader for the newly created semi-autonomous air traffic organization, many of his efforts to cut bureaucracy and trim costs have been frustrated by the resistance of congressional leaders. Cost-saving proposals that involve closing facilities, for example, frequently are stalled because lawmakers fight the loss of jobs in these districts. A famous parable, having friends in high places. Leaders also seek to increase their power by searching for greater responsibility, such as serving on committees and boards, also volunteering for difficult projects to jump ahead within the organization. Impression management is another form of political activity that is an approach whereby leaders seek to control how others perceive them, often creating an impression of greater power as well as helping them to gain more power. How leaders, tactics for asserting leader influence. How leaders use power and influence to achieve, facilitate, and pursue organization goals. Leaders usually use a combination of influence strategies that are successful influence tactics, namely rational persuasion. Rational persuasion. Perhaps the most frequently used influence tactic is rational persuasion, which means using facts, data, and logical arguments to persuade others that a proposed idea or request is the best way to complete a task or accomplish a desired goal. It can be effective whether the influence attempt is directed toward upwards of superiors, downward towards subordinates, or horizontally, because most people have faith in facts and analysis. Rational persuasion is most effective when a leader has technical knowledge and expertise. 2. Make people like you. Make people like you. That sounds easier than really is for some. We all know it is easier to say yes to someone we like than someone we don't like. One author of a book on influence tells a story about an American working in Saudi Arabia who learned that getting information or action from government officers was easy when he dropped by, drink tea, and chat for a while. Cultural values in Saudi Arabia put great emphasis on personal relationships, but people in all cultures respond to friendliness and consideration. When a leader shows concern for others, demonstrates trust and respect, and treats people fairly, people are more likely to want to help and support the leader by doing what he or she asks. In Trinidad, as compared to Saudi Arabia, we mightn't stop in and drink tea, might have a beverage, meaning alcoholic beverage. Thirdly, rely on the rule of reciprocity. Recall this discussion of dependency and how leaders gain power by having something that others value. The primary way to turn that power into influence is to share what you have. Whether it is by time, resources, services, or emotional support, there's a rare universal feeling among people that others should be paid back for what they do in one form or another. The unwritten law of reciprocity means that leaders who do favors for others can expect others to do favors for them in return. Leaders also elicit the cooperative and sharing behavior they want from others by first demonstrating it with their own actions. Develop allies. Your friends' base should always be widened. Reciprocity always plays an important role in developing networks of allies, people who can help the leader accomplish his or her goals. Leaders can influence others by taking time to talk with followers and other leaders outside of formal meetings to understand their needs and concerns. Leaders consult with one another and reach a meeting of minds about a proposed decision, change, or strategy. A recent study found that political skill, particularly network building, has a positive impact on both followers' perceptions of a leader's abilities and performance, as well as the actual object performance of the unit. Ask for what you want. Ask for what you want. Another way to have influence is to make a direct appeal by being clear about what you want and asking for it. If leaders do not ask, they seldom receive. Political activity is effective only when the leader's vision, goals, and desired changes are made explicit so the organization can respond. What you can say there is like the ministry is asking the finance minister for what they want. Sometimes they do get 3/4 of it, sometimes half. They always ask for what you want. Remember the principle of scarcity. The principle means that people usually want more of what they can have. When things are less available, they become more desirable. An interesting destination study on the purchase decisions of wholesale beef buyers found that buyers more than doubled their orders when they were told that because of the weather conditions, they were likely to be in scarcity of foreign beef in the near future. Interestingly, though, their orders increased 600% when they were informed that no one else had the information yet. Retailers often use the principle by sending advance notices of sales to credit card holders, making them feel they're getting information that the general shopping public doesn't have. Leaders can learn to frame their requests to offers in such ways to highlight the unique benefits. Extend formal authority with expertise and credibility. The final principle for asserting influence is the leader's legitimate authority in the organization. Legitimate authorities are in a position to be particularly influential. However, research has found that the key to its successful use of formal authority is to be knowledgeable, credible, and trustworthy. Managers who become known for their expertise, who are honest and straightforward with others, and who inspire trust can exert greater influence than others who simply try to issue orders. In addition, effective leaders keep the 6 previous influence principles in mind, realizing that influence depends primarily on personality rather than position power. By understanding the importance of rational persuasion, liking and friendship, reciprocity, networks of alliances, direct appeal, and scarcity, leaders can extend the power of the former position and strengthen their influence over others. Strategies. Think politically. A key step is to acknowledge political nature of leadership. Create and nurture the networking of people they can all want to work with to accomplish goals such as managing the uncommitted. A key step is acknowledging the political nature of leadership. Leaders cannot get anything done unless they create and nurture networks of people they can call on and work with to accomplish goals. At the start of any change campaign, good leaders line up their supporters, start working closely with their opponents, and develop tactics for influencing the uncommitted. Manage conflict. All issues are accomplished with conflict, and this are accompanied with conflict, and this is what leaders are expected to manage and use. Any tough issue is bound to be accompanied by conflict, while the natural tendency for most of us is to limit conflict. People learn and grow only when they encounter ideas and challenge their experience and assumptions. Leaders are expected to find ways to harness opinions, emotions, and attitudes which have the negative energy to create conflict and minimize the destructive potential in them. Keep your hunger in check. Everyone has hungers, expressions of normal human needs, but leaders are careful not to let their hungers disrupt their capacity for acting with wisdom and purpose. For example, a lust for power becomes an end itself, distracting a leader and a leader's attention from organizational needs and goals. Inappropriate personal behavior damages trust, creates confusion, and destroys relationships. An inflated sense of self-importance limits the capacity for self-understanding and meaningful, caring relationships with others. Good leaders understand where their vulnerabilities are and work to keep them from taking charge of their lives. Lust for power becomes an end itself, distracting leaders of the organization's goals and needs. An inflated sense of self-importance limits the capacity for self-understanding and meaningful, caring relationships with others. Ethical considerations for ethical actions. Is action consistent with the organization goals rather than being motivated purely by self-interest? We can continue. Does action respect the rights of individuals and groups affected by it? Does action meet the standards of fairness and equity? Would you wish others to behave in the same way in the action affected you, if the action affected you? Having considered above, one can make an ethical choice. In conclusion, in today's world, organizations consist of transactional, transformational, and charismatic leaders. Charismatic leaders can be both positive and negative, socialized and personalized. Leaders engage in some form of political activity, adopt tactics for asserting leader influence, and employ ethical considerations in achieving the organization goals and objectives. So the question bears now, what kind of leader are you? Anyone? Okay. Is this the end? Yes, it is.
This brings us to the end of our presentation. Mr. Bishu, classmates, we'd like to thank you all for your undivided attention. And we hope that we will in some form or fashion, we have been able to educate you all, enlighten you all on the topic of power and influence. And we implore you all to read chapter 12 for your own further edification. Again, thank you. This brings us to the end of our presentation.
Okay, if there are no questions, I'll pause the recording.
Is that different spelling for references?
Say again, please.
I just had one question with regard to the spelling for references.
Don't worry,
That is a French spelling.
That's joking, that's joking.
All right. Okay, I'm going to stop the recording now. Hold on.